rahmatullah. In this short video, let me discuss the Hajj, the pilgrimage. And I thought one good way to cover this topic in the coming 10 or so minutes is to go to a chapter in the Quran that has the name of Hajj, Surah Hajj. Like to highlight one important point is that the surah, which we call the chapters in the Quran, it has the meaning of sur in Arabic. Literally, it means a boundary wall, sur. Okay, and each surah of the Quran has a theme that has its semantics and meanings and contents within that boundary of the surah. So if a surah is named Al-Hajj, then there must be a significance of naming this surah with the name of Al-Hajj. And all the verses in this surah, they all come and support the central theme of this surah, which is the Hajj. And that's why I think studying the topic of Hajj through the Surah Al-Hajj is very rewarding. And often one of us might read Surah Al-Hajj, and out of the 10 pages or so, one would find only 2 pages covering the topic of Hajj. If we wanted to directly see the ayat that talks about Hajj, it's only 2 pages out of, let's say, 10 pages of this surah. So one might say that, okay, the other 8 pages are irrelevant, but really I wanted to tell you that no, let's consider the Surah Al-Hajj as the entire surah. The 10 pages has to do with Hajj, and these are the things really I would like to highlight here, really. But it's not the scope of this discussion. Is how the Quran summarized a surah that might have 10 pages, 15 pages or so into just one word. For example, Baqarah, it's around 50 pages surah is concised into one word, that's Baqarah. So what's the significance of that, and how each and every ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah aligns with the central topic of this surah. Surah Al-Hajj, I think one is a journey. It's a literal physical journey that the person who intends to make Hajj, he does this journey. And the journey of Hajj, the physical literal journey that one makes from his distant country towards Mecca, reminds him of other journeys that are metaphysical, that are not that obvious. But this Hajj is a good opportunity that links up this the physical journey with the metaphysical journey. When you came to this world, you went through a journey. We all went through the journey that might have started from sperm fertilizing an egg, and then that meeting between sperm and egg initiated an interesting journey in the womb of the mother for 9 months, and then you came upon on this earth. And then after you came this earth, we are in a journey, actually, right? From our birth until our death, it's a journey. And then after we die, what happens? We start another new journey. So the opening of this surah is really very interesting, where this kind of concepts are linked together. And my advice to all the pilgrims, all the Hujjaj, is to, while you are engaged in this 5 days interesting spiritual journey, do remember this bigger journey and other metaphysical journey. Hajj, really, through these efforts that you make within these 5 days, the central theme that you want to achieve is the submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fearing Allah. And the submission really is done through the heart. Okay, so submission or humiliation or surrendering, feeling oneself humble in front of the Almighty and Majesty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's an activity in the heart. But the reality of human psychology is as such that whoever has a very deep and intense feeling in the heart, it's very hard to conceal that feeling without its symptoms shows up in the physical world. Okay? And Hajj is really such the place or the state where a person can show his fullest submission to Allah is when he is ready and very willingly he agrees to place the most noble part of his body, which is the forehead, the head. Okay, this is our noblest part of the body. He agrees to place it in the most lowest and humiliated part. That's the ground where there is the dust and all these things. So that's the sajda, right? That's the prostration. And have you ever gave it a thought that why this particular surah, Surah Hajj, has two sajda in it? There are no second surah in the Quran that has two sajda in it except this surah. And when you think about the Hajj and its objective is to submit to Allah, feel humbleness, and makes oneself really humiliated in front of Allah. And if sajda is the best way to do that, and the fact that there are two sajda in this surah, these are all ties up together and aligns to our central theory, or the central theme that I wanted to talk about, is that this surah conveys that's the submission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the taqwa. And that's why this surah talks a lot about the taqwa. It starts with that, Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum. Okay, so it starts with the taqwa. And it's interesting that it starts with addressing the mankind. Although the pilgrimage is, the Muslims does it, but really there are lots of things in the activity of the pilgrimage that the whole mankind should benefit from and should really make them think seriously to make Hajj through, of course, embracing Islam. So the person, when he starts this journey, he removes all the clothing, standard clothing that distinguishes the rich from the poor, and all just wear same standard clothes and assemble in front of Allah in this in the ground of Arafat, feeling humiliated and submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when this taqwa, this fear of Allah, which is in the heart and is shown up through this activity and efforts during the Hajj, where there is no arrogance and discriminations, and everyone feels united. When this kind of thing happens, then really that's the time where Muslims regains their glory. And have you ever thought about the later part of this surah, Surah Al-Hajj, when you will find that after immediately describing the Hajj as if the Haji performed the Hajj and he is cleansed from his sins, and he is now a newborn convert to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have you ever imagined what kind of ayat, the verses that came immediately after the Haji finishes his rituals? Let me tell you. From verse 28, immediately when the Hajj finishes, Allah says, Inna Allah yudafi'u 'anil ladhina amanu, Inna Allah la yuhibbu kulla khawanin kafur, Udhina lilladhina yuqataluna bi'annahum zulimu, wa inna Allah ala nasrihim laqadir. Allah stands as a defense in favor of the believers against their enemies. And Allah knows that many of the many of the believers or many of the Muslim community are under oppression, and if Allah wants, He would surely grant them victory. So what does this all tell you? What's the significance? See, this is the point that I wanted to tell you, is that this surah gives a hint to the believers that if the believers really fulfill the Hajj in a way it should be, that means you have the submission, you have the concept of the unity with your Muslim brothers, you have that feeling of taqwa inside your heart, and through this journey you cleansed yourself, then when you return back home you are a different person, and you are and you as a whole Muslim community are now ready get out of the oppression that you might have been under by your enemies.